Hot-blooded tendencies, fighting whenever possible, school life, well, more like avoiding school as much as possible and having it as a glorified background half the time. Dyed hair, or maybe crazy hair in general, maybe some motorcycles, and of course, the squats. Wait, I know that from somewhere. Man, it's been a long while since I made a video about manga, and even longer since I've done a delinquent video, and it's given me a mild headache, so I think it's time for another one. And since the last one got demonetized because it's, edgy and had no views anyway, I might as well try to get my penny from ads and switch it up for a second. And don't worry though, I have some ideas for the search for the edgiest. So what am I doing? Well, like a year or so ago, there was a manga my brother told me to check out for two reasons. One being that it was a delinquent manga, and everyone knows how I feel about that. The other reason was that the title was very, eye-catching? Yeah, that's the word for that. But more on that in a second, maybe. That's the monetization feel. Anyway, as I kept reading, I got hooked, and even though the most recent arc has taken a dip, I think I can safely say that Tokyo Revengers by Wakui Ken is in the top 5 of my favorite manga of all time. And now I figured it was the perfect time to make a video about it because I was surprised to see that it got an anime announced for it. So here's a video about why you should read it, because more people should be reading this, especially if you like delinquent manga. Now that I think about it, the video is starting to feel a lot like Ringo Ishikawa, and it's been a little over 2 years since that video came out. Time sure does fly. Before I jump into what the manga is about, I should probably address the elephant sitting right between Tokyo and Revengers. I don't think I'll post it for obvious reasons, but if you look up Tokyo Revengers, you'll find it really easily. Just head to Mal and you'll see. Anyway, that's not the S symbol. If you look at both of them, the Tokyo Revengers one is going the other way. That symbol actually means manji, which I think means something akin to peace. Don't quote me on that though, but it's found on Buddhist temples and stuff in Asia. To people in the East, it has a different meaning to them compared to how we see the symbol. There's a good example of this in JK culture. I've read an article about a slang term they use called manji where they would even pose as the symbol, and I'll link the article, but the gist of it was that they kind of just do their own thing and are only vaguely aware what the S symbol means. Alright, we cool? You're not gonna complain about it, right? Right? Alright, let's get into the manga. So first of all, what's the story about? And this is probably the best time to say this. I'm not going to spoil anything because this is more of a recommendation than a review. And if I spoil the manga, why would you read it, So the story is about a 26 lame-o named Takamichi who finds out his girlfriend when he was a middle schooler was killed due to gang violence. This gets him thinking about how his life went nowhere and that the girl killed was the only girl he loved and stuff like that. Woe is me, where did it go so wrong type shit. And then he gets taken back to the past after having a near-death experience. If you ask me, I think it took him back to the place he desired to be most, but that's just guessing. There's only one real thing I could point to as proof, and later possible developments could make that untrue, or more true. I don't know. I need Wakui to hurry it up. Anyway, he goes back to his middle school days, and once he truly accepts that he can time travel, has some convenient things happen, and gets a helping hand from someone close to them, he decides to work his way to the top of the gang that killed his girlfriend and stop her death from ever happening. He acts as our conduit. He knows just about as much as we do, so we get things explained to us through him. Also, him being way older now means he kind of has to mentally confirm memories from his past, so that answers the question of why he has to explain things he should already know. As for the time travel, I really enjoyed it as a device to create tension in the story. It creates a loop that the story follows where we see the future results which causes Takamichi to try and fix the problem. At least for me, it's always stressful to see how bad or even badder things got in the future. The most tension comes from seeing how what he did in his past affected the future, because there's always something going on. But on the flip side, it makes you root harder for Takamichi in the past because we've seen how bad things have gotten and it takes a lot of work to try and correct it. So when Takamichi gets a victory, no matter how hollow, it feels great. Especially considering what he was like at the start of the manga, but I'll come back to that. I will point out that some things expected of shonens don't always happen here. Things like the power growth of Takamichi being more realistic. Like, he can beat randos, but the bosses are freaks of nature, so it makes sense that he's not winning every fight. He has to scrap and he endures so that he can win. Also, there's a lot of loss. At least a good amount of it, whether it's prison or death. People you might like can have their mortal coils severed. Maybe not the main characters, but the ones close enough to the main characters. Like I said, there is some realism and that's just a consequence of the lifestyle. And that's all I'll say about that. So I'm sure some of you heard that little summary and were like, hold on, this sounds real familiar. And yeah, I know what you mean. It kind of feels similar to Bokudaki or Erased. I know you guys remember that one. It was all the rage when it came out. It kinda is the same where both of the MCs are losers who get thrown into the past to save someone who died in their present while developing bonds with people they didn't interact with the first go around, and honestly, that's where the comparison ends in my opinion. The biggest difference stems from Bokudaki being a seinen and Tokyo Revengers being a shonen, though Wakui's other two works are seinen, so it's not completely like a shonen. And with that, the moods and the personalities of the MCs are really different from each other. One is a little bit more brooding and thinks things through a lot, while the other one is more hot-blooded and guided by emotions, which does put them in tough positions. If you ask me, I prefer Tokyo Revengers, but A, Tokyo Revengers isn't finished, so it might nosedive, and B, I'm biased because I love delinquent manga. But with all that said, if you enjoyed Bokudaki or just time travel stories in general, you need to give this a try. In my opinion, the strongest aspect of this manga are the characters and the bonds they have. It feels really natural, and you can tell how much they care about each other, whether it's through what they say or the actions they take. In particular, the relationship between Takemichi and Hinata, his girlfriend. It has a standard young love, but there's an added layer that comes with Takemichi coming from the future and knowing she dies there. It creates an interesting dynamic of Hinata living in the moment and Takemichi doing anything it takes to stop his future from happening. It makes you root for them because you can see how much they love each other, and it just has to work out. Please let it work out. Then you have the brotherly bond of the main characters. They're willing to die for each other and they put their faith in one another. And this is even more interesting to see considering 90% of the main cast had a neutral to bad first impression. Initially, it was set up to seem that Tomen was this evil organization full of dangerous delinquents, only to find out that, hey, they're pretty cool. And this is noted by the shift of Takemichi's goal from destroying Tomen to saving it. Through him, we grow to care about the characters and hope to see them survive to the end. When they hurt, we hurt, and it's all because of the amount of development the characters got. Takemichi in particular grows a lot, and it comes from the motivation that the characters share. See, in the manga, several characters want to return to the heyday of Delinquents where it wasn't too rough, and Takemichi symbolizes the purity and heart that these characters feel are lacking from modern Delinquents. These traits continue to grow in Takemichi as he fails over and over and can only cling to his hope and desperation to save his friends. This is further emphasized by the fact that Takemichi quite literally goes back in time to what he initially feels was his heyday. Meanwhile, there are some villains that want to start a brutal era of Delinquents. The best way I can explain it is the difference between delinquent characters as protagonists and as antagonists. Shoot, that parallel happens pretty early in the manga when Takemichi meets the delinquents from his time and his reality comes crashing down again. In addition to that, it sets the stage for the big clash of ideals for what is the best route for these delinquent gangs to go down. And while it does feel a little black and white at times, Wakui Kin does a good job at least showing the motivations of the villains and why they do the things that they do. Long story short, there's a lot of heart and a certain degree of realism and loyalty in these characters that is refreshing to see and makes me at the very least want to keep reading to see what happens to them. The biggest criticism about the characters is that there are a lot of them and it's hard to keep track of all of them, especially when updates take a bit at times to come out. This could be especially confusing when characters kind of leave the story for a while and come back or are referenced later. For example, Takemichi's original group of friends, except maybe one of them, gets relegated hard to the back line, which makes sense because they're low in Tomen. But when they do come back into the story occasionally, it takes me a second to remember all of them, and that goes for other people in the manga. Sure, that could be partially attributed to the art, but still, there are a lot of characters to keep track of. Now, what about the art? Let me put it like this. It's good when it needs to be. The worst parts about the art are that the fights could be a little hard to follow when he decides to make it a gang v gang brawl, some of the characters having similar designs, and the long necks. The long necks are immaculate and it makes me feel bad. With that said, there's not any part I could point to that had a notable drop in quality, so all in all it's pretty consistent, especially when you look at his other stuff. While reading Revengers, I also picked up Sekisei Inko, which is also by Wakui, and I realized two things. He likes himself some stories about going through time, and his art has gotten noticeably better. You see the art on the screen, I've probably put out some comparisons. Yeah, I know you see it, you can't deny it. Though the long necks are ever present. And I think that's where I'll call it. The video might not have been that long and I may not have conveyed it well, but I do greatly enjoy the manga and recommend you read like the first 5 or so chapters, like up until it goes back in time for the 3rd time. Of course, there are some questions I still wonder about, like what happens to young Takemichi when he goes back in time? The shift in personality is enough so that most people recognize it, so I don't think the younger one is aware of what's happening. Are there gaps in his memory, or is there a new timeline or something? I don't know, but it doesn't really ruin my enjoyment or anything. I will say here, and I think I've referenced it, but the most recent chapters released at the time of this video have been dragging a little. It seems like it's falling into typical shonen trappings and it's a little off-putting. Like sure, MC kinda goes overboard with the talk no jutsu at times, but this is another level. If you get that far, you'll know what I mean. It's definitely shaping up to be the worst arc, but that doesn't mean it's bad because the other arcs have been really good. It's like picking the worst season of The Sopranos or The Wire. And that's where I'll leave it. There are some other manga that I've been reading lately that I really enjoy, and of course, I could talk about my all-time favorites like 20th Century Boys or Salt if you want to see that. Let me know in the comments, or leave a comment if there's something else I should check out. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe because that's what all the cool viewers do. But before you practice your squat to oi 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 combo, have a good day.